You could have millions in pensions, but if you are still 45, then you can't access it. You could have a house that is worth £2 million, but if you can't find a buyer, you can't convert it into cash in an emergency. That's why you need emergency funds. You need something that is liquid and that you can use immediately you need it. You don't want a scenario where accessing the emergency fund is as stressful as the emergency itself. Hello everyone, my name is Modupe and today we'll be setting up your emergency funds. Quick reminder before we go though, everything we cover is for education only. It's not financial advice and it shouldn't be taken as such. If you do need financial advice, please reach out to a licensed professional. So after talking about emergency funds, the next logical question is, when you have an emergency fund, where do you keep it? One thing to keep in mind is your emergency fund has a specific role. It's to be available when you need it. That's the main function, because your other assets may not always be available when you need it. You could have millions in pensions, but if you are still 45, then you can't access it. You could have a house that is worth £2 million, but if you can't find a buyer, you can't convert it into cash in an emergency. You need something that is liquid and that you can use immediately you need it. But then you can't keep it in your bedroom. It needs to be somewhere where it won't lose value. Its role is not necessarily to give you the highest returns, because the returns can be quite disappointing. Its role is to stay safe and secure and available when you need it. So when it comes to short-term money, there are a few key things that I look out for. The first thing is the nature of the investment itself. Any investment type where the principal can reduce is not for emergency funds. Because you don't want to put in £20,000 as saving and receive £18,000 back. That's not an emergency fund. So that automatically rules out anything that fluctuates like stocks or crypto. You can't put your emergency funds in the stock market because the stock market could crash. The value of an investment could go up and down at any point in time. That's the whole essence of having those funds separate from stocks. So that sort of limits our options to either cash or cash-like investments. The second criteria that I have is about the role of the emergency fund. Like I said, its job is to be available. So personally, I prioritize easy access savings accounts. The money is for emergencies. You're not going to get an advance notice for an emergency. So I do not like the idea of notice accounts, because if I need money urgently, I should be able to access it without a headache. Ideally within days, not weeks. So I shouldn't have any penalties for withdrawing within a set period of time. I don't do fixed deposits when it comes to this kind of money. If it's for something else, fine. But if it's an emergency fund, no fixed deposits for me. There can't be any complex withdrawal rules like, oh, you can only withdraw 2 times in 3 months or something interesting like that. It needs to be available when I need it. Now, this also requires a bit of discipline, because you have to make sure that you don't interpret every single occurrence as an emergency. It's not an emergency if your friends show up from out of town and say, oh, we're going to Ibiza. It's not an emergency. If you don't have the money saved up, you are not going to Ibiza. That's not an emergency. It's an emergency when it's something that you genuinely have to pay for and you can't avoid. If you own a house and your roof starts to leak now, you have to pay for it. If for whatever reason HMRC shows up at your doorstep and say you have this tax bill that you haven't paid, it's an emergency. You need to take care of it. So I personally avoid any account that requires a notice period, has any complicated withdrawal rules. It defeats the purpose of an emergency fund as far as I'm concerned. You don't want a scenario where the emergency fund is as stressful as the emergency itself. It should make your life easy when required. Now, the third criteria that I have when it comes to where to put this money is the reliability or the level of trust that you have in the financial institution. If I'm saving that money here in the UK, I need that organization to be regulated by the FCA. The FCA is the Financial Conduct Authority. And I also need them to be registered on the FSCS scheme. Now, FSCS is Financial Services Compensation Scheme. It's a lot like the NDIC in Nigeria. NDIC, for those that don't know, is the Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation. The way NDIC works in Nigeria is every financial institution in the country is registered with them. So if you have money with a bank or any other financial institution and that institution collapses, then you will be refunded by the NDIC up to a particular cap. So right now, I think they updated that cap a couple of years ago to 5 million naira. So if you have, say, 6 million naira sits in the bank account and the bank collapses, you get 5 million naira. If you have less, you get the amount that you had. So if you had 4 million, you get 4 million. If you had 6, you get 5. FSCS works pretty much the same way in the UK. So for any financial institution that is registered with them, if the institution collapses and you have a deposit with them, then you receive compensation by the FSCS. Again, up to a cap. It used to be £85,000 before, but it was recently increased to £120,000. What this means is if you had, say, £60,000 with the institution and it collapses, you get paid £60,000. If you had £200,000, you get paid £120,000. So the way some people do it is if they have a lot of savings, let's say you're a couple and you're saving towards a home or whatever reason, they spread it across multiple institutions. Let's say you had £200,000 that you wanted to keep as your emergency fund or that you needed to save for a short period of time. You could keep 120 with one institution and then the remaining 80,000 you save with a second one. So that way, all that money is covered by basically the insurance that comes from the FSCS. So in case one or both of them collapses, you will still get fully compensated. And then the last condition that I also consider when looking for where to put my emergency funds is the return I get on it. We've already established that the role of emergency funds is to be available. But then something else that drains the value of emergency funds is inflation. So you don't want to put it in an account where its value will slowly erode over time thanks to inflation. Imagine you put like £20,000 as emergency funds in an account and inflation is 3%, but the account is paying you 2% interest rates. That means the value of your emergency fund is dropping by 1% every year. You don't want that. So the interest rates must at least shield it from erosion from inflation. Now, we don't have to chase the highest interest rates. You just need to make sure you are above inflation. The good thing is in the UK, typically you can find accounts that give you those kind of rates. Which takes us to our next question. Where do you find these accounts? It doesn't make any sense to try and be searching from bank to bank, checking interest rates. That's pointless, especially considering the fact that most banks have multiple saving account types with multiple different interest rates. So there are 3 websites I'll give you today. I'll leave the links to them in the description. The 3 websites that I typically use. Money Saving Expats. They have a dedicated page for a savings account, particularly easy access savings accounts. There's another blog called Be Clever With Your Money. And there's a third one, Money Facts Compare. Any one of them will do. I typically prefer Money Saving Experts. But like I said, I'll leave the links in the video description. Now, what these sites give you is the interest rates that you can get from different products from different banks. Some of these banks have different savings accounts. In some cases, the rate is just for new customers. In some cases, the conditions tied to it. I try to avoid accounts that have too many conditions tied to it. But in a lot of cases, you will find accounts that won't have too many restrictions and you'll be able to still get a decent interest rate on your money. And then the sites also let you know if the bank is a real bank or maybe like a pseudo bank, because there's some banks that are not separately protected by the FSCS because they are offshoots of other financial institutions. So you also get that information on a site like Money Saving Expert. So 2 things you need to remember is you don't have to pick the very absolute highest option there because like we saw, the rates could drop in a couple of weeks. So it's not about the highest interest rates you see, it is about which conditions are suitable for what you want. So for instance, I lean more towards fixed bonuses as opposed to just one variable figure that could change anytime. And then the accounts must definitely be easy access. I don't want it to be something that requires notice. The interesting thing is a lot of easy access accounts actually have higher interest rates than notice accounts, which is odd to me. The other thing is the comparator sites like Money Savings Experts will give you like a quick top line summary of what the conditions are. But sometimes you actually need to go to the institution site itself to see all that details. Because in some cases, the conditions for new customers could be different from the conditions for existing customers. Or you could have a particular type of account that pays interest annually and another one that pays interest monthly. So you want to check those details before you commit to that particular institution and go ahead and open the account. So if you look at the options under the easy access, you notice it mentioned cash ISAs as an option. ISA basically stands for individual savings accounts. And the way it works is everyone in the UK has an allowance of £20,000 per year that they can invest tax-free. Whatever you make on the £20,000 is completely tax-free. You don't pay any taxes on interest rates, dividends, or capital gains. Now, that allowance is split across whatever you put into cash ISAs, stocks and shares ISAs, or lifetime ISAs. Cash ISAs usually can be generous with their interest rates. But personally, I don't prioritize cash ISA for emergency funds. Not because they don't meet all the criteria. Usually they do. The institution is fine. It's usually accessible. They pay enough interest and it's protected by FSCS. But the reason I don't like to use cash ISAs is because historically, you're likely to make more money from an investment in stocks than in a savings account. So if you put your emergency funds in a cash ISA, you're reducing the amount of money you can allocate to investments in the stock market tax-free. You basically reduced how much you can use for long-term investments. And though investments can go up and down, you are more likely to generate more growth from your stocks and shares ISA than you would from your cash ISA, meaning the tax benefit you would get there would be more. Now, I want to be clear, cash ISAs are not a bad product. They're good. They meet all the criteria we talked about. But when it comes to my emergency fund, I prefer personally to reserve the allowance for investments in the stock market. So if you've opened the account, one other thing that I would typically recommend, especially if you're building your emergency fund gradually, is to automate your deposits. So if you open it today, if you can, put in £100 in there, just to wet the ground. Open it up with about £100 and then try to automate monthly deposits into that account. So over time, you can build that emergency fund to the target that you want. And you don't have to consciously rely on willpower every month after you collect your salary to allocate that 20% and then take out of it to put into your savings. Automation is a huge, not only time saver, but it's a huge way to ensure that your growth engine continues to grow. Because you don't have to rely on motivation, you don't have to rely on willpower, you don't have to even remember. You just see that amount leaving your account and you get the notice, oh, it's gone to your savings account. It's still your money. So I would encourage it. Just set up a monthly standing order. If it's £100 you want to put every month, £200, £500, whatever the amount is, every month, this amount of money goes in there and builds up your emergency fund. Now, once you've reached the target, because you want to build that emergency fund up to a particular target. Once you reach that target, or you know, okay, if I deposit this amount of money every month, I will reach that target in 12 months. You need to set a reminder to switch off that monthly contribution, because you don't want a scenario where you put so much money in cash or in the savings account at the cost of what you could have invested in a long-term growth account. That's something else to keep in mind. But for now, consistency is key. Set up the direct debit, and that puts you ahead of a lot of people in the UK. So if you're able to build up that habit and consistently have a backup savings in case of an emergency, and you don't just have to borrow money or use credit card to be paying for something that you shouldn't be, then you're actually doing pretty well for starters. So today we've learned what really matters when you're looking for where to keep your emergency funds. We've actually opened an emergency fund account together, and we've set up a system for automated monthly funding of that account. I will leave links to the comparator sites that I talked about. And if anything else comes to your mind, then feel free to leave it in the comments. Have a good evening.